Okay, good evening. Welcome to UPARS Los Angeles. This is April 2018. We have an excellent speaker for you tonight. His name is Sean Bartok. Sean, which is really his pen name, has worked as a professional art director for a major U.S. corporation. He's been a university professor of art, design history. He's a recipient of numerous national art and design awards. He's an entrepreneur, a developer, and was the owner of a fly fishing ranch. He's the inventor of a U.S. utility patent. He's company president, freelance artist, a design consultant, and a first-time memoir author. I hope I get there someday. His accomplishments in art and design are documented in many ways. He's been in the Marquee Who's Who in the West and Marquee Who's Who in America for 33 years, Marquee's Who in the world. His work in the field of education is documented in the International Who's Who of Intellectuals, published by the International Biographical Center. Okay, but let's get down to the reason he is here tonight. Sean has been abducted many times during his life, but was not aware of it until he was 43 years old. Tonight he's going to be talking about this, along with his wife, Bobby. His children had numerous experiences with aliens and paranormal. Showing and giving his analysis of photographs he and his wife took of UFO circular beam-down tracks in the snow will be the focus of his presentation. But he brought with him a chart, or really what I call a plat map in the real estate world. And he's actually marked all the different paranormal occurrences that happened on that one property he owned in Colorado. He's since sold it, but I think the number was up to 96 or even further. So there were a lot of things happening. This is sort of like Skinwalker. There are many places in the United States where these things happen. We don't know why, but it's sort of the inspiration for UPARS. Originally, we were MUFON, and we realized that paranormal phenomena are tied to ufology. For example, Bigfoot or poltergeist, whatever. These things seem to happen in areas like a rash. And I think Sean's going to touch on that tonight. He's brought books with him. Did I say that? Did I say you guys like that? He's written a book. Flashbacks, an artist's memoir of alien abductions. He's brought several copies with him tonight. I think you should check it out. His analysis leaves little room for any other explanation for the creation of these unique tracks in the snow that he's going to talk about. Sean and his wife have kept their experiences and evidence mostly to themselves for over 30 years, but Sean is now finally coming forward with this information. So, with that, please give a warm, friendly greeting to Sean Bartok.
I was 40 years old, teaching at a university in Denver. Sarah was teaching at a high school in Jefferson County, and she was teaching 6 courses in photography each day to over 150 students, and they won all sorts of awards. So we know a little bit about photography, her in particular. But we were having trouble in Denver in a sense, in as much as the brown cloud that gathered every day was causing headaches for us as well, in terms of physical headaches that was so thick with carbon dioxide. At the same time, our children were going to be bused. Crime was beginning to increase, and Sarah had never lived in a house where she had her horses. So we decided to move out of town, and so we decided to move out of town. We found this piece of property, and it was south of Denver, southwest of Denver, near the Castle Rock area of Colorado. And we liked it because of its natural beauty, and so we built a passive solar home. We wanted to build an underground home, but it was just cost prohibitive. So this is a passive solar home, and it's performed very well for us. The location from the air shows the fact that we have a great mass of rock above us, which was mostly tuffed from a volcano about 60 miles away, sometime in the Precambrian era. It had cobble and rhyolite in it. It's also turned out that it was one of the most active lightning strike areas in the United States. The only area that was greater was a place called Gulf Breeze, which you might have heard of. So there was that problem, or at least that was a problem from time to time. We had geese that would circle in this area at night and circle until they would just evidently either give up getting out of the area because there seemed to be a magnetic field. This particular drainage was, in my opinion, a ley line, even though it's not a straight line, which I think is not a truism for ley lines. They exist in straight as a Mercator projection map on the Earth. They're more, since they are breaks in the crust of the Earth, which is basalt, they don't cleavage on straight lines. They fragment like a break in a cake. This was also seemed to be a ley line. We had when they were drilling the wiring for the house, they went through a kiva in this area, and the area had been inhabited by the indigenous people from 7500 BCE to 1750 ACE. And in the canyon next to our canyon, they took 40 trunkloads of artifacts out of a cave that existed there. So there was a heavy influence in terms of Native American population, which showed up in many ways, as you'll soon see. Let's see if we can advance here. Here's the plot plan of the area. Here's the house. Here's the studio that I worked in, and also a barn for the horses. Here's the ceiling of the floor plan from above, the roof. This is the first floor, and that became a real hotbed of activity. And this is the second floor of the garden level. Over the years, the 17 years that we were there, these are events during a year. This is 1980. And these are the number of events that we had in and around the house. And it goes through all the way to 1997 when we moved. And as you can see, some years had a lot of events, some years had very few. One of the first events was about 4 days after we moved in. And I've titled this Life. That was February the 24th, 1980. And it happened, the first one happened in our bedroom. It was late at night, probably 1 o'clock or so. And I woke up to this tremendous dream that I'd had. I was with these ancient people. They were very tall. My nose reached about the bottom of the scapula of one of the lead people. They were wearing strange clothing, robes as I could detect, but I was more or less paralyzed and could move my eyes, but not my body very well. And we were going up the mesa, or a mesa like the one that we just saw. Oh, okay. We were going up the mesa like the one that we just saw. And we were stopped for some reason. And so I turned around finally and pivoted, and I looked down below, and there were a line of people coming up from behind, and they were carrying torches instead of flashlights, which was kind of strange. And they had really unusual looking clothing on. They were like peasants out of maybe a Boris Karloff movie. So it was probably, maybe 17th, 18th century type of clothing. So I woke up and I bolted up out of bed, and I'm sitting in bed, and I noticed that up above there was creaking. The rafters were creaking, and then soon after that, some light washed across from the upper part of the living room, which was adjacent to this, and that piqued my attention because we were building. People were building in the neighborhood, and they were afraid people were stealing lumber. So that really got my attention. Within seconds after that, I saw a light right out here, but the ground was broken at the time. And the light was about 18 inches long and about 9 inches wide, and it was brilliant, but it didn't have a beam to it at all, but it was kind of vibrating a little bit. So it was about 10 degrees out that night, and which was typical of that era, that type of the year. And so I thought maybe the person was vibrating because they were shaking or had the palsy or whatever. And so I'd had problems the night before with some lights and the like. So I grabbed my 38, which is in between the mattress and the springs, crawled down over, got ready to open the door and jump out and see who it was. And the light switched around and went over to my left. So I ran around the house, and this is where the light was, but the patio wasn't here. So it was really close here. Somebody was up here on top, as it turned out. So I ran around to the front of the house, stood up here, and I was waiting for whoever came around this corner, because I figured it was a prowler, but there was no one there. About that time, I heard gravel crunching under tires, and it was the sheriff's department coming out to check on the area or do a patrol. So I saw the lights. About that time, Sarah, who's sleeping in the bedroom, and this is all open up above, she said, "Do you see the lights?" And I said, "Yeah, I see the lights," which I did. I was looking south, she was looking west. So she was seeing lights, and I was seeing lights. Unfortunately, they weren't the same ones. So we went through this dance of yelling back and forth. "Do you see the lights?" "Yeah, I see the lights." "Do you see the lights?" "Yeah, I see the lights." "And did you see the lights?" And so I quit answering because I was really kind of irritated about that time. And with the lights business. So I watched the lights come in the subdivision road, which wound around. And I thought, oh, they're great. They're coming up to see, if everything's all right at our house, because I put a nightlight in the children's bedroom that particular day, and it was on. And so I thought, well, they're coming in to see what's going on. So I ran around to the other side of the house, or the north side of the house.
Keep talking to one.
And watch it down there. And so I waited outside. I'm in my underwear. It's 10 degrees. I'm getting cold because I've been standing out on the porch waiting to ambush who's coming over. Who's coming around the corner, and then seeing cops come in. So I wait, and finally no one shows up. So I go down. I check on the children. They're sound asleep. So they didn't hear the commotion that we were making as we yelled at each other about the lights. And so I took a couple of aspirins, ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, drank some milk, went to bed. Sarah's already asleep. She's got to get up at 5, dress the children, get them ready, drive 50 miles to work, and drop them off at daycare. So she's sound asleep. I sleep until the next morning, of course. She's already gone. And so I decide to feed the dogs. I yell for them, but I don't have a voice. So I call in sick, and I feel great, other than the fact that I can't talk. So that begins the odyssey. So as I went to the local town, which is Castle Rock, bought a bunch of 2x4s, and I thought, well, I'll start building framework for the storage units downstairs in the mechanical room. So as I unloaded, I was just getting ready to go in the back door here, or the upper level door, and all of a sudden I'm riveted. I mean, just stopped in my tracks. And I immediately look up, and I see a person standing up here on the bluff. And I'm a sort of aggressive person at times, so I thought, I'm going to stare this person down. They're trespassing, and I don't like it. So I'm staring at this person. He's staring at me. I can tell that because he's pretty intense. And I'm staring, but I'm not seeing. So finally, I give up because the 2x4s are rubbing the raw here on my shoulder. So I go inside, and I take the 2x4s downstairs to the mechanical room, and all of a sudden it dawns on me that this person that I'd been looking at had weird proportions. So I run back upstairs to see if I could see him, but he had a big head, he had long arms, he had a long body, short legs, and he seemed to be wearing some kind of jumpsuit. So at the time, I didn't know, what I was looking at. So I went on about my way because he was no longer there when I got up. And it takes at least 20 minutes to get up to the top. And I figured by then he's driven off, and so what? Never see him again. So I went ahead and I worked all day on the units, on the building the storage space. Sarah comes home, and the first thing she says is, "What did you think about the lights?" And I said, well, it's nice to know that cops are, coming around and checking us. And she says, "No, I mean the lights." And so that's when we found out that she was looking out the west window and that she was seeing something totally different than I was. So the light that I had seen, the bright light that seemed to move to the south of the house, She saw it after I left the area, and it was oscillating around the house and up the bluffs. It got up on top, and all of a sudden it was like the animation that you see of clouds that are moving very fast. And it was pink and blue, and the lights were going around and around, and it just disappeared. It didn't take off. It didn't do anything else. It just disappeared. So that was a revelation. We were excited about it because we knew we'd seen perhaps a UFO. And in those days, this is 1980. UFOs, nobody talks about that because it's not a hot topic, and it's also a taboo topic. If you talk about it, you're considered a nut job. So, anyway, that sort of really began the odyssey, and I was euphoric over it. To think that we'd seen something unusual. At the same time, we knew we weren't alone in the universe. We also were just excited to be part of it. The next day was my day off. I went up to see if I could see anything, where I could find some footprints or something. And so I looked the whole rim of the mesa off, which was all rocks and cobble and some growth, and I found nothing except directly west of the house, which looked right down into our bedroom because we didn't have any drapes up or anything, were 3 marks, and they were just gouge marks in the rock outcropping, really slight, but the patina of the rock's surface had been scraped away so that you could see the parent material, which was lighter in color. And the marks were about 1.5 inches long by 3/4 of an inch wide. And they were very hard, and then they slid. So it looked like a tripod. And then it turned out they were 6 feet apart, and whoever was there, or maybe even was still there, had this peeping Tom kind of thing right down into our room, which sent sort of a little terror through me, because I knew we were being watched, and we'd had some crazy things happen the first night we were there, but we just assumed that it was a problem. Next event I'll talk about is the red sparkler, and I'm laying in the bedroom. I'm sorry if I don't have this controlled yet. I'm laying in the bedroom, and I see the pink and blue lights. I've hunted them before and haven't done very well with them in between the first time, the lights, and now. And so I lay there, and I know what they mean. And the lights are coming through the skylights of our bathroom and shining on the wall of the hallway that leads to the bedroom. And so I start to get up, and as I do, I see a beautiful green light coming down what I think is the hallway. And it's coming down towards the bedroom. That's when I decide to get up and get the gun, and I can't move. And so something's holding me down. And then I just fade out. The next thing I know, I'm laying down. I'm looking straight ahead. I'm frozen, and the light is behind me now. And so I can only roll my eyes around again, and I roll them to the right. I'm blind in my left eye, so that's the only way I can really see. And I noticed there was a thin chrome sparkler head, or a tube that's by my optical chiasm area, or my temple. And the thing is about 1/4 of an inch in diameter, and it has a hole in the middle. And then all of a sudden it starts spewing these deep red, looks like sparks, but they don't touch me at all, and becomes a hemispheric thing of sparkler-like elements that they begin to rub back and forth, parietal to occipital, back and forth. And so I don't know what to think. I'm somewhat terrified because I have no idea what it means. So then I think, oh, they're trying to fix my eye but I'm blind on this side, or my left side. So I think, why don't you move it over to the other side? But I can't talk because you can't move. So I'm thinking, move it over to the other side, the other side. So, but they keep going back and forth, back and forth. That's this lime green light behind me doing this. And I know now that I'm not in my bedroom, or our bedroom, because the head of the bed is up against the wall. And in order for that to happen, they'd have to be able to reach through the wall to do it. So, then I know I'm not at home anymore, but I don't know where I am. It's pitch black. and they just keep moving this wand back and forth. And so finally, I just sort of slip off into Never Never Land. I wake up the next day, and I'm perfectly fine. So the bathroom had skylights in it. The lights that I was seeing were coming through here, through an open door, and onto a hallway. So the lights were right up here, coming through here, and I was sleeping here. At least I thought I was sleeping here. And so that was a crazy event, but 2 days later, I noticed that I didn't have a birthmark on the back of my head. The birthmark had started out as a flat oval, it was about 3/4 of an inch to an inch in diameter. And over the years, with me brushing my hair, it had turned into a three-dimensional thing, and it became irritable. And so the doctors told me they might have to take it off because it became problematic. If a barber clipped me with one of the instruments, I might get blood poisoning and die. I wouldn't even know it was happening. So it was gone, totally gone. The dermatologist I now go to looked at the area the last 2 years in a row. There's absolutely no evidence of ever having a birthmark in that area. I had a large mole on the side of my face. It was gone. And so I got the feeling that I was not with hostile people, that they actually, through the removal of the birthmark, it actually were good. So at that point, I had less fear, but I was still circumspect and thought if the opportunity arises, and I meet one and it doesn't look friendly, I'll do what I have to do, which probably would be just a faint. Up a tube. If these names sound provincial, they are. Up a tube. Sarah and I woke up in the middle of the night to the most horrendous noises that we'd heard so far. Boom, 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 in a random order. They sound like the old cherry bombs that you used to buy in the 50s. Really loud reports, and they woke us up, and then there was this growl of a very powerful engine. And so it just took over the random explosions and lifted off, and you could just hear the Doppler effect as the sound just went through sort of different layers or densities as this thing moved up heavenly. So it was, gone in a flash, maybe 3 seconds, and the sounds were over. So I thought the whole living room had been blown out because it sounded like it came from the roof area. So I got out of the bed, and we had not moved because this was like so loud and so scary that we didn't move. We just looked at each other. And then as soon as it was over, I ran over and looked in this area, thinking that there should be a gaping hole in the ceiling because it was just so incredibly powerful. But it was okay. There was nothing wrong. The house didn't vibrate. Paintings didn't fall off the wall. It just, made this tremendous noise. So then I ran outside to the patio and I checked for grasses. I thought, well, these are wild grasses up here. They're dry oftentimes. I thought that would be on fire, but there was nothing there. So, I didn't know what to think except for the sprinklers in this area right here just started coming on. And so they were watering, and I changed them from a daytime schedule to a nighttime schedule to mitigate trans evaporation so we could, water and be more efficient. So I thought, well, maybe that frightened them because they self-drained, and each time they came on, they blew all the air out. So they sounded like hissing snakes when they came on. So I thought, well, maybe that's what happened because all the events up to that point were more or less based on secrecy. They didn't want to have you hear them. They didn't want you to see them. So that was kind of a big turning point too. There was a big subdivision meeting the next weekend. So I asked everybody in the neighborhood, did they hear anything coming from our canyon? And the answer was no. But one person who lived directly across from us said, no, I didn't hear anything, but I saw something really strange. And so I said, well, what was it? And he said, I saw a reddish white object come off the top of your roof, go straight up in the air, and head due west. and it looked like it came down on the mesa. So he saw it. We saw nothing. We heard it. The children who sleep in the room maybe 20 feet away, they were still asleep because I checked on them as I went by out to the patio. So, there were no sounds that we could hear or that they could hear. And so in 2015, I became aware of the fact that in the O'Hara Field in Chicago, the grounds crew saw a large UFO near the ground, and they called the tower to see if the tower saw it. The tower didn't see them, and all of a sudden it lifted off. It went through 8,000 feet of clouds and left a hole that took about 10 minutes to dissipate. So, it became one of these situations where either it was a wormhole that they were going up, or else they were making their own hole and then following it up. So that's maybe why you can see them, but you can't hear them. I was also reminded of the 1947 sighting where the saucers, the UFOs seemed to be skipping across space as though they were dishes being thrown out across the water as they skipped. So that would be maximum energy, minimum energy, and they could be going through a tube at that point that they were either making collectively or individually. So that was of interest to download February 18th, 1982. Most of these events, except that one, were in cold or cool weather. After the cool weather left and the heat came on, then we had rattlesnakes. So we went from sort of one reptilian climate to the other. We were the hunted, and then in the summer we were hunting reptiles ourselves. But this particular night, I woke and I felt a little strange, and I didn't really know where I was. And so I roused up a little more, but I couldn't really move again. And then I noticed that I was in a hemispheric room that was luminous. The light was coming from the walls itself. And then I noticed that there were images that were sliding by. They were going down. They seemed to be like 35 millimeter images, 3 by 5 inches by 3, and except that they were big, maybe in footage, 5 foot by 3 foot. And they were sliding down this wall, and then they'd disappear, and another one would be behind it. And all of a sudden, I see a 13th century apothecary bottle with a green label and a skull and crossbones on it that's black and white, black. And then I know I've seen this before. In fact, it was in one of the history of design books that I was using. And so from that point on, I knew that they were taking whatever I had in my head and putting it on the screen to see what kind of relationship I had to it. So as soon as they noticed I was interested in that because I identified it, then they slowed it down. Then as soon as I had digested that, then more images came by. When I was not in my classroom or the office, I was in the library, the university library, and I would go through maybe 5 periodicals within a matter of 2 hours that were yearly bound periodicals, Domus, Graphis, Progressive Architecture, Box Graphis, and the like, and just jamming myself with as much information as I could, visual information. I'm pretty much a right-brainer. That's the way I think, and that's the way I do. So the next image I saw happened to be MacArthur wading ashore in the Philippines, and behind him, he's in his nice pressed khakis, and he's got his whole support team, and behind are these large landing craft. And near the end, at the beginning of the Second World War, he had promised the Filipinos that he would return. And so this is an image of him returning. It's a ubiquitous photo. You've probably seen it. And at the time, I was a real fan of MacArthur. But as the slideshow, dog and pony show went through, I began to wonder. I see this and it stops. And I recall the skull and crossbones, and then the war machine that he represented, which was us, and it was great. And then the images began to stream by again to a desolate moonscape. And so by that time, I knew the dog and pony show was to say, hey, a runaway general, a derelict general is going to be poisoned, could be nuclear war, and the world is going to look like a wasteland, such as the moonscape. And I had been working on similar images prior to that, so they were loaded in my head. So as I lay there, I began to be really cognizant of what was happening around me. I could feel that they were really positive, and they were trying to train me in a particular manner that would be anti-war, to be peaceful and the like. And then I thought, wow, they could, if they took somebody who was really brilliant, they could upload as well as download. So instead of taking the images to see, they could insert in your Rolodex, your mental Rolodex, something that would be really important, especially, let's say, if you were a physicist. And so that was really heartening. And at the same time, it was euphoric to know that was possible, that they were helping us. They weren't trying to come down and kill us all. So same bedroom, same problem. Okay, so then in 1988, Sarah brought this image home, and she had her students use infrared film, black and white. This is the old days. You developed it yourself. Had a number 25 red lens on it, red filter on it, and one of the students brought home this image, which is over Martin Marietta, which is a high-tech firm outside of Denver. They did a lot of work for NASA, and so this is over that particular area. And I don't know if you can see it, but this cigar shape, you see this light, and this light, and then you see a beam. Does anyone see that? Okay, so the student had inadvertently, been photographing clouds and came up with this. So this is over Martin Marietta. And so, it was sort of a confirmation of, what was possible. Perhaps they were beaming someone up, or maybe they were in the process of actually contacting someone else. And as you know, William Blake, he alluded to the fact that he thought he had been helped. Brahms, same thing. Einstein, there are people behind it or talking to them. They were in communication with more than just themselves. We had talked about, or I had talked about our experiences at the university, and I sort of got put down. So Sarah and I didn't talk at all about what happened around the house or anything. And so by that time, I was about to go crazy in 1983, because we'd had 3 years of this. So one night I saw a guy by the name of Leo Sprinkle on television, and he was a clinical psychologist at the University of Wyoming. And he often dealt with people who thought they had been contacted by ETs or abducted. So I went up to see him. He said, after I told him some of these stories, he said, "Yeah, John, I think you have, been abducted many times." And then he said, "Is there anything in your past that seemed out of place or unusual?" And nobody had ever asked me that before. And all of a sudden, I'm flooded with some situations that had occurred. And so from there, he asked me about those. And this is Leo. And he led the Rocky Mountain UFO conferences from the mid-'70s up through the '80s. So he was way ahead of his time in what he was doing, and he had really great people as team. So one of the first memories I had was called Catch and Release, because I'm a fisherman. And I was a freshman at the University of Kansas. I was getting my lunch served to me. I was getting Fs, double Fs, and triple Fs. And I was really depressed. I just had another eye operation, and I looked like hell. And then I found out my girlfriend was cheating on me every night. And that pretty well threw me over the edge. So one night I found myself headed for my grandfather's farm pond in Paola, Kansas, because I used to spend my time down there fishing for large bass. And so I thought, I'm going to go down there, catch one more big one, and then I'm going to do myself in, because I was at the end of my rope. So I drive down, I go fishing, it's night. By the time I get there, it's nighttime. I have a topwater lure, which turned out to be crazy because it was too cold for even a topwater lure. The bass had all gone down in the thermocline by then. But anyway, I was using the topwater lure, and as I drug it across the water, and it was dead calm, I could see the stars up above and my lure coming through the reflection in the pond, which looked like, like something going through the cosmos. And then I saw Sputnik, and it was moving, this light moving slowly across the heavens, and it was also in the pond, and then all of a sudden, there's nothing in the pond. It's dead. There's no light whatsoever. I look up, bingo, it's just a void. 14 hours later, I'm out in the field about 150 feet from where I've been, wandering around, and didn't have any idea if I was coming or going. And so finally, I figured out I was going back to the farmhouse, and I noticed the rod and reel were in the wrong hands. I smelled my hands. I didn't smell the pungent odor of a bass. So I knew I hadn't caught a fish, and yet I had evidently been out there all night. There was frost on the leaves, and yet I was perfectly fine. I wasn't cold or anything, even though I had shorts on. And so evidently, the only thing you could conclude, and this is 1959, you didn't hear about abductions and all, is that, I had been taken. And I found out, years later, that I wasn't the only one around the farm that had had an unusual experience underneath a circular element or circular crack. And another kind of a common thing was that we were near the Olathe Naval Air Base. And so you know how UFOs and military installations are. If you want to hunt one, go there and get a photograph. So that was my first really known experience. Second one that came about was the face in the window, and this is March 17th, 1970, and I was a young professor at a university, and I was doing some night work. I was doing fashion illustration for the Denver, which was sort of a high-end mercantile in Denver, Colorado, and 29 or 30 rather. But so far, the pattern begins 9, 19, and now at 30. And so it sort of followed a typical pattern that Leo Sprinkles saw, that I'd been followed, or that things were happening to me on a 10-year cycle. And I think actually that it was, I started at 5, because at 5 I started saying my prayers religiously. I was really concerned about getting to heaven. It was a big deal for me. And so I said my prayers up until the time every night religiously until 1997. And then I abruptly quit. And that's going to be in book 2. So I'm doing fashion illustrations for this company. And at the same time, I've got to write a big paper for the new director. And the new director was hired right after I was hired. And the word was he was going to can everybody that, that couldn't cut the mustard. And so I was hanging out. I didn't have tenure, and I just started there. So I'm really worried about this report. So I finished my fashion illustrations that by 7:30 in the evening. But prior to that, I came home. We ate. Sarah had dinner for me. We started doing the dishes. I'm drying, she's washing, and all of a sudden I feel something rubbing on my leg. And I look down, and it's this black cat with these gigantic yellow eyes. And so I said, do we get a cat? And no. And I hadn't seen the cat. So I picked it up, and there was a door right behind me in this galley kitchen, and I put it outside. So I didn't think anything much about it. So I continue drying, and then this cat's back on my leg again. And so I pick it up, and this time when I put it out, I give it a real heave out the door, and I shut it. I shut the door and I lock it, and I go around to the house, which is a small rancher, and I check all the windows and the doors. They're all locked. The front door's locked. The screen door is locked to the front of the house. It's locked. Everything's locked up, and this cat keeps getting in. And you'd think about that, but I didn't. And so we finished the dishes. Um, so then I went outside to do these drawings, and this is the last one that I remember that night. And so I went outside, and it's cold in Denver this time of the year. And so I had the space heater at my feet, and the nichrome wires will light you up, literally, with your feet down by it. So you have to move around a lot. So I do the drawings. I'm done by 7:30. The next thing I know, I'm staggering around in the kitchen underneath these fluorescent lights that are buzzing and irritable, making me very irritable. And I look at my watch, and it's 3:30 in the morning. And so I freak out, and I think, and I didn't know if I'd done my report. And the report was the biggest thing on my agenda. And this was small-time potatoes, because I was okay in their eyes. But, I'm worried about my job. So I freak out, and I run out, and I see, my work is all done. And so then I go in to tell Sarah, or see how she is in the bedroom. And I open the bedroom door, and right in front of me was a face that scared the crap out of me. It was, this hideous face in this small window. And the window was locked, it was latched, but I had the window itself up, and the only thing that was there was a screen. I had I had 4 batches of beer going in, cooling off in the bedroom, as I had gotten into the beer making process. And so I kept that cool. So I went over and I tried to wake Sarah up to tell her that I had seen an omen, because that's what I thought I saw, was an omen. And I thought I was going to die. So I'm trying to wake her up, and I'm shaking her up and down, pushing her up and down on the bed until she's almost flying off of it, but she won't wake up. And so then I fly into the studio again to see if I had been smoking. Well, I had a whole ashtray filled with cigarette butts. And so I thought I was going to die from smoking. And that freaked me out even more. So I'm just totally zonkoed. And at the same time, I'm tired. I can't believe how tired I am. So I know I'm not going to make the deadline on my report, or at least I think I'm not going to. So I go to bed, deliver my artwork that next morning, and I go to class. I write this piece very quickly. The secretary types it up, and I'm home free. So while the faculty meeting's going on and the director's hammering at everybody on how short they're falling in his eyes in terms of production, I do this little gesture. And so this was a sketch. Normally I don't do figurative stuff. I do mostly landscapes while I'm listening to him drone on and on. So they're sort of doodles that come directly from the subconscious. They don't come, in any other way. So that was the doodle that I did. It reminded me of that night. So I switched on and I kept on going with landscapes. The next day I'm designing a postcard for the school, a recruiting group postcard. Well, this is hardly what you call a recruiting group postcard. But it reminded me, now when I look at it, it reminds me of a Frabahar, which is the winged icon of the Zoroastrian faith, and the Ohira Mazda figure that's riding in this winged disc. Except this is sort of a modern interpretation of that. But I didn't think about that at the time. But so I was really, into these tubes and things, because the thing that really fascinated me most about this figure I saw in their face, I saw in the window, with all these tubes that seemed to be coming down from the throat area or the chin area, like nothing I'd ever seen before. So that didn't fly with the director. And so then I did another one, which was stars that were coming at you from one point perspective, and they're sort of frozen in space. You've probably seen that from time to time if you watch Ancient Aliens. They use that a lot. So, that had to do with space travel. But this is like 1970. UFOs aren't a big deal then at all. So this is what I'd been doing the year before. I was an art director at Hallmark Cards for a couple of years. But I wasn't a corporate person. I just couldn't think the way everybody else did. But at any rate, so this is the kind of work I was doing. And then the next thing I'm doing is this, which is a longer drawing, but it still has a doodle-esque quality. But, if I but this, I'm still preoccupied with wires and hoses for breathing, and also the mind. So you can see all sorts of references to synapses and maybe other kinds of elements that I don't really understand. They're just dick. But here's one that's an interesting line, and that wire came from, I don't know where it came from, but I know where it went. And now I have a nice little indentation in my head where the doctor doesn't know how it got there or even when, but I think I do. I think I was drawing myself that, of what I was seeing or feeling or experiencing that night. At the same time, some of the doodles were like this feedback between the machine and man, except in this case, the man is now controlled by the machine, which didn't happen or didn't come about until later, as we know. Or even androids, where people that are composed mostly of artificial kinds of elements. So that was happening. At the same time, I'm anti-war, so I'm doing all these anti-war drawings that are doodles that are done very fast, but that makes them very poignant in terms of the kinds of the line work that's going on. And also children being cloned and being delivered out of a artificial vagina. That was big with me too. So they're just sliding out. This may have religious influences. I don't know. I didn't think about that at the time. But the big worry I had was, in these longer pieces of work, was overpopulation. So I had whole cities covered with tombstones. At the same time, the images were seeming to burn up or just melt. Then the electromagnetic spectrum and being deteriorated, as well as, young people being born into a world where there are too many people. And now when I think about that, which was done about 1972, I think about today and the notion of global warming, and global warming wouldn't happen unless there are too many people. Because in the 1800s, there was only about 1 billion people on the planet and everything was working fine. Now there are 8 billion people and things aren't working so fine. And what we produce and what we do is altering the environment to the point that we are about to do ourselves in. So that was the poignant one to me. I was doing collages too when I get tired of drawing and the like. So this is one that became really poignant for me when we lived in Plum Valley. We had noises that would just occur in the night. They'd come out of the air, and there wouldn't be anyone there, or there wouldn't be anything there. So this was kind of like noise. People were going through walls. You could see them. I saw one just walk right out through a glass door. And what I could see was just the contours and the inner contours of the person where the density is greatest. So, that became a truism for me. In 2016, Ethan Rich, who was a MUFON investigator, asked me if I could duplicate what I saw in the window that night in 1970. And so, using the written word as well as my memory, I drew this particular person, which is pretty much a standard gray, but it had tubes, lots of tubes, like kind of tubes that you'd see if you're a scuba diver. And so those were always fascinating. And at the same time, that was pretty new for me in 1970. You did the ubiquitous images that you see of UFOs today, you'd say, well, that's just a standard gray. But at the time it wasn't. It scared the hell out of me, and I went kind of cuckoo. So if I take the drawing that I did the next day after I saw that, or something similar, if you join the two, then you might get at what I really saw, because the first one, the realistic one or the sketch, is more tainted with things that I've seen over the years. So, that sort of And this is directly from my subconscious, but it doesn't give you as much information. The mantra. So I talked to, this was all happening while I was talking to Leo, these things popping out. And so I said, what can I do? And he said, well, Sean, I'd like you to go up on the mesa. I'd like you to meditate. I'd like you to tell them that you put your guns away and that you would like to meet with them and that you won't hurt them, but you don't want to be frightened when you see them. So I go home and I'm saying this mantra all the way home, which is 5 hours. I get home and so I start my process here. It's about 10 o'clock at night. Everybody's asleep at me. But I have some artwork that requires a meticulous kind of process. It's sort of brainless, but you know, you got to do it to get at the point where you want to. Because by now I'm doing fashions and I'm doing fabric work. And to heat set them, it takes a long time. So I'm in this area, which is the family room, and I work until 3 o'clock, constantly repeating the mantra. And I've got it so that it's moved back to the top of my head, the back of my head, and I can continue doing what I'm doing. And at the same time, it's just churning it out. So I go to bed about 3. I get up at 10, start the same process over. And but at that time, I can hear our son out on the porch playing with his cars on the handrail. And Sarah and our daughter, Brianna, are downstairs, and this is the open area. So I continue working. About 2:30, son Scott is running in this downstairs door, and I hear him say, Mommy, Mommy, there's a live skeleton out in the tree. And so she says, oh, no, it's probably just a big bird. Oh, does it have feathers? Oh, no. So this dialogue goes on. Finally, he gets tired. He runs upstairs. He comes up the staircase, goes into his bedroom. His room has got sort of a study area, and we have our Encyclopedia Britannicas in there. So I hear him searching around in there because I'm just right here. He's there. And then he rushes into me and he jams this book in front of me, and it's a human skeleton. And then I see what he's talking about. Large head. And if you take away everything but our bones, the skeletal structure looks like a UFO, classic UFO. So then we know. So we all rush out and to see where he's talking about. So this is the tree that he said the ET was in, and it was sitting on the limb on its buttocks. It had its head down, its shoulders would be up, and its legs were dangling. He said he ran up to it, and it looked up at him, and he said, Daddy, it was really scary. And we said, well, why? And he said it had Molly eyes. Well, we couldn't figure out for a while what Molly eyes were. And so we said, well, why don't you come inside and we'll draw pictures of it and see what we can come up with. See, to find out what Molly eyes were, because that was really perplexing. So we went inside, we did some preliminary drawings. So this is what he drew. And the Molly eyes turned out to be slits. So, and at the same time, the colors were different. You know, where we have white, it was yellow. Where we have the blue or brown, the iris, that was purple. So it's either one of those. I've interpreted it the other way around, and the pupil itself, which is a slit, was a different kind of color of blue. So, you know, of course, that was pretty revealing. And at the same time, with the eyes like this, it was no wonder I thought that he was looking down, is because if he were looking out, the sun might be just more than they could handle. And so maybe that's why they came at night, because I thought anything that comes at night and steals into the house is fair game for me, and they're evil. But then I thought, well, maybe not. Maybe that's the only time they can move around, is when their eyes are shielded by the darkness. He also said that it had a upside-down bird nest with it. And so we couldn't figure out what that was. I mean, it's too big to be fitting in a bird's nest. So this is his drawing, and it's sort of classic. Big head, skinny arms, skinny legs. You know, his body is small, which is like a 9-year-old would do, in as much as they focus on the thing that is most important. That's big. Things are less important. It's called a hieratic order, where you take things and the least important are small, the important things are big. When you look at a child's drawing of mommy, daddy, and his siblings, mommy's big. Daddy's sometimes clear down on the other end. He's not thought of very well. But normally it's this hieratic order. So that was his interpretation. Then that night, so we go back into the house. He does his drawing. I go back to work. I'm still repeating my mantra because it just hadn't dawned on me that maybe he was the messenger and that it didn't frighten me because, I knew him. And so that evening, he had a friend over. They were playing in the bedroom that he came out of. And two of them came rushing out saying, he said, Daddy, he's back. He's back. He's looking in the window. So we all rush into the bedroom. Of course, he's not looking in the window anymore. And so what he was doing was, the house has a parapet. It's a flat roof. He was on the roof with his arms down on this, on the top of the window, on the top of the sliding glass doors, which is glass, which is called the garden window. And he's looking in. He's upside down. So the next day, I did a drawing. It's a quick banner on fabric. So he was looking in like this. And I got the eyes wrong. What was purple was the iris. The sclera, which is white, was the yellow. And then the pupil, which is slit, was blue. But this was sort of the frantic kind of feeling as we rushed into the bedroom, not knowing what we were going to find. So they said, aren't you going to go outside? Aren't you going to go outside? And it was like, wow, I don't have a gun because I'm not going to break my mantra. I told him I put my guns away. Damn well, I'm going to keep my word. But I was really too afraid to go out. And it was probably, becomes a regret of your life because you're probably familiar with Joseph Smith. He met Moroni that way. And so I thought, wow, what I could have learned. And we know that in most of the ancient civilizations that the ETs or the visitors walked with the populace and helped solve problems, helped enlighten people, etc. So I felt really crestfallen years later. At the time, I didn't think that much about it. I was just afraid to go out. And that was a sad admission, but this is about the way I felt. And I think everybody else did, but the children are a little braver than I was. A couple of weeks later, they have Brianna at school, and they say, draw a picture of your house. I said, no, houses are not red. So she switched to brown, and so she put this ET on the porch. And so this is and I think she called it the sad and lonely alien. And so he's on the porch. He's got slits for eyes. He's also got 3 digits, which turned out to be pretty important because a lot of the ETs that are seen or experienced have 3 digits. And we hadn't talked about that at all. The drawings that our son had done, he had just fingers, maybe there were 6, who knows. So that was pretty important. What was even stranger was 3 years later, we buy this ranch down in the middle of South Park. And the house is like so. And her drawing is like so. As you can see, there's a definite kind of relationship. So what she'd started with the red is here, but houses are never painted red. Now, if you're around old ranches, they come through and they spray everything. Same color. It's cheaper that way. And they just give it a blast with the red in this case. So she is very, clairvoyant. And so this is a good example of that. That's Cocopelli. We all know that's the flute player. So we had Native American spirits running around. Bore the brunt of their first appearances by throwing them up the outside the house, scared the heck out of them. And so we had a lot of experiences that way. But this is one that I had, and this is in April 1983. I'm working in the studio. It's about 1:30 in the morning. I'm getting tired. So I decided that I need to go home and I go up to the house. and go to bed. So this is the outside of the studio. This is the inside. I'm working here, and all of a sudden I hear a flute playing out here. And one of the things that the spirit, this particular spirit, can do is he can absorb sounds and then pump them back out. So Brianna was playing the piano. We got a piano because we couldn't get TV. We couldn't get radio. So we had a piano, and Sarah, the pianist. So she was teaching them how to play the piano, and she was learning flute in junior high. And so the flute was evidently, the sounds were taken by the spirit and then pumped back out at me. So I rushed, turned on the outside lights. We had floods outside. Turned off the inside lights. And the only defense I had was my 36-inch T-square. So I got that out, and I waited inside for 30 minutes or so. And as I did, I could hear the horses next door to me. And we had a mother with a foal, and they were kicking on the side of the walls, and making a hell of a lot of noise that I hadn't heard earlier. And but I didn't think anything about it. So after the lights, and I continued working, but I knew damn good and well I wasn't going to go to the house because I've got about 400 feet before I get to the house, and it's pitch black. Because season and walking around in the with rattlesnakes is not a good idea. In the first 2 years that we lived here, I killed over 80 rattlesnakes, and that was to protect them. Otherwise I would have let them be. But the children, they was 3 and 5. You do what you have to do. So to walk around, it was dangerous. So about 7 or so, I walked up to the house. As I walk up to the house, I meet Sarah going down. She's going to feed the horses. She said, "What's going on over at Jackie's?" I said, "I don't know." So I looked to the east, because I was going west, and we see some prowl cars or patrol cars down at our neighbor's house. So I just keep on going. I go up, and I sleep till about 3 o'clock. I get up, and so Sarah said, was really eager to talk to me, and she said that Jackie's horse, which was in a birthing stall with their foal, out between a big boat and a 4-horse trailer. So, that was pretty bizarre. And in as much as not only the mutilation, which there had been a bull mutilated some years earlier and dropped in the top of a cottonwood tree across the mesa from us, but this is, near home. And at the same time, it was the same age as the foal and the mare that we had in our birthing stall. So, that was hard to it was made of it, and it just sort of disappeared because we'd had a lot of other experiences. However, there were 3 stock tanks that this woman had filled the night before. They were 500-gallon stock tanks. They were all empty. And she had other horses out in the pasture, but not more than 4. That's quite a stretch to drink 1,500 gallons in a matter of one day. So, and she wasn't home at the time when this happened. So, that was our experience with that spirit. And what was strange, too, was the fact that was it against or for, the ETs? What kind of relationship do they have? So that sort of pointed to the fact that maybe they are in opposition to one another, and he was trying to warn us about it. As for me, I was doing Indians, but these were Barrier Canyon style, Fremont style, and so, that became a real thrust for me. And I was also into rocks. I thought that there was going to be a polar shift, and that we're all going to go to hell when the south and the north changed. There wouldn't be any gravity. We'd all be flying out into space, etc. So that was something I was working on. And then I was also doing banners at the time. This one's 42 by 9. This is he's an Apache. And so the Native Americans that were around in our area were Apache Arapaho. And so that was fitting, and at the same time, kind of poignant. I was also doing fashion work and so on, and I did a whole fashion showing at the Denver Museum that was based on Native American images and styling. It's about 9:30. Everybody's asleep in the family room but me, and I'm bored because we don't have TV or anything like that. So to occupy your mind. So I stick my head out the door in the courtyard, and it's maybe 10 degrees out, and there's a light snow falling, but it looks like the end of the snow. But I decide to drive our Bronco up and down the driveway to keep it open in case it starts drifting, because that happens a lot. So I go out to the Bronco, which is out in the out here, right here, and I try to start it, and it won't start. And that's pretty weird because I had just put a new battery in the car, a die-hard battery, about 3 days earlier, and it had worked fine. But now it's dead. It doesn't click. It doesn't do anything. So I'm still awake. In fact, I'm more awake now than I was. So I decided to go down to the studio and work until I get tired and then come back as usual. So I leave to go to the studio, and by then I was a baby. But I never remember getting there, and Sarah doesn't remember me coming back. But I wake up on Saturday morning, and I have this pain in my wrist that's incredible. I'm sicker than a dog, and I'm throwing up, and that's pretty unusual for me. But I've got this pain in my wrist, and I look at it, and you can maybe see right here. Okay, it looks like in many cases there are some teeth marks. They were rectangular. They don't show up in this too much, and they're right over a vein. And when my first abduction, which I think it was an abduction, or they just came into the house and worked on me, was when I was 9. And I remember I heard the screen lift in the bedroom. I was 9. My sister was at a slumber party. I was by myself, and I about freaked out. And I covered my head, and at the same time, because I didn't know what it was, but I knew somebody was coming through the window. And then I was frozen. I couldn't move. That even made me more freaked out. And then something was stuck in my toe, or at least it felt like a pinprick in my toe, and I passed out. And the next morning I wake up, and everything is okay. The window, the screen is locked. So I think nothing happened. It must have been me. But this was different. So here I am. I've got this. It's killing me. And I'm having this dream. Is when I do go back to sleep, I have this dream. And in my dream, I'm sitting in a seat that is humongous. And my knees don't bend. They're sticking, my legs evidently are sticking straight out in front of me. And I can't move. I can only look straight ahead. And I'm looking at a banana seat that is so gigantic, I can't believe it. And all I can see is this kind of rosy brown light material. And so I sit there, and I know I'm not supposed to look around. I just sense it. But I can sense there are other people in the room, wherever I'm at with me. So finally, I get up the courage, and I start rolling my eyes to the right. And first of all, I see a round window. I'm like, what the hell? That's a porthole. And then, it dawns on me that maybe I'm not in my room. And so, I roll my eyes a little further, and then I see black. I see this person. The person looks human, but it looks like an animal. And it's perplexing. But I only have a short amount of time to look, but the person has got this sort of reddish brown hair that it's like an animal that has been brushed by going through the weeds and the like. If you've ever looked at a wild animal's face, it's all short and it's combed back. So I figure it's a guy, with all his hair, but I'm not sure. And I'm not sure what the hell I'm looking at, but he's got gigantic eyes, and they tend to wrap around his head. So that's pretty weird, too. So I only get a chance to look at this thing for a little bit of time, and all of a sudden I hit in the kidney, my right kidney, with what I don't know, but it brings me back to reality, and I switch back to just looking straight ahead at the seat in front of me, and then I go kind of just into nothingness. And so as the day wears on, I'm getting better and better. By the next morning, which is Sunday morning, I'm fine. So the sickness that came over me just came over me, and then it was gone. But my wrist is still killing me. It's like I've got lightning bolts going all the way to the bone, and it's over this artery. So I'm thinking, well, maybe these guys injected me with something when I was 9. It has been in my system all these years, and they're taking it out of me. So maybe I'm just like some sort of Bloody Mary cocktail, for these people. And so I could sort of look at it that way. So Sunday morning comes, we have our breakfast, and Brianna goes out to feed the horses. So she immediately comes back in, and I call this Jacob Ladder in the book. And out to the east of the house, there's a circle. And I'm calling the dogs because there were 2 other circles, and they've already been destroyed pretty much by the dogs coming and going. But this one's out in the area where they don't go. So I can see that what it looks like to me, like some footprints. And there's a large set and a small set. So that's interesting. So I walk a little closer, and I just can't help but I want to touch it because it represents so much more than what anything else, because we've had like 3 years of just crazy stuff happening, and then all of a sudden there's some evidence. But lo and behold, it's in the snow. I can't make prints out of it. It's going to evaporate, or else it's going to melt, and then there'll be nothing. So I'll still be babbling to people about these things. So we're taking photographs as fast as we can. So this is, of course, me trying to touch it. And then I get closer. The width of this thing is about 8 inches, but it varied depending on the depth of the snow. It was rotating in a clockwise direction, from what I could tell, just by the way the snow fluffed out and was kicked out away from it. We get a little closer. I get a ruler. We see what's the diameter. Well, the ruler didn't cut it. It's 36 inches long. And so we put a string across it, which was kind of stupid, but that's all we had. Turned out to be a rope from the barn. And it made this pattern, which you can see the track coming through here. And that kind of screwed that up. But I can clearly see there's some footprints here. And it turns out that the larger one is 10.5 inches long. That's exactly the length of my foot, my bare foot. The other one is 4.5 inches long, which is maybe matches a creature that would be, or a person that would be 3.5 feet tall, something of that nature. And then there's some strange things happening in H, which is in the center here. There's a center point right in the middle, of course. And then it looks as though the feet have moved out and they've made a mark in that direction. There's some crazy fluffy snow that's been kicked out too. So it's a real mystery, except for the fact that the feet, I know, are mine, because everything added up. It was going down to the studio. All of a sudden, I don't remember getting there. Bobby or Sarah doesn't remember me coming to bed. And then I'm sicker than a dog. I got this problem with my wrist. That's circumstantial, I know, but it seems okay by me. So we look at it a little closer. This is what becomes really a conundrum. What's going on there, and what's going on here? So this is another diagram, and I'm thinking that we slid out of this because there are no footprints on the outside of the circle that match my footprints, nor the small footprints, all the way to the house. So, that's like 50, 60 feet. So I'm figuring, well, something happened here. Somehow I got out of there because I was in bed the next day. So this is just a drawing of what I think happened. And I think there were 2 of them, because I'll show you some other footprints that are muffled. They're almost floating above the snow. I think one of them, the one that the footprints are dominant, picked me up or lifted me up. The other one lifted and then leveraged himself out of there, and we were airborne. It was strictly a matter of being airborne all the way to the house. And that's the way I've got it. This is the cover of the book, and that's what that means. So it looks a little eerier at night. I like that. Anyway, so that's what I think happened. If you've got a better idea, I'm always open. So this is another real conundrum. This is the first step out by one of the little guys, and you can see here that the footprint, it looks like a meteorite hit straight down. It was snow was blown out around it in all directions. It didn't come in and slide in like a foot might. It didn't glide in and then go down. It's just straight down. So that was kind of hard to figure out too. So if I take another schematic here of A being one of the small person's foot, as it leveraged it out and then propelled this towards the house and up even higher, then it sort of makes sense. What doesn't make sense is that particular footprint. So this is the closer of the center. This is my footprint. And then here's something that's really telling too. You notice that my feet don't move. Here's my foot here, and here's my foot here. These are the remnants of the smaller ones moving around. So they had a lot of activity. I'm just there. I think I'm cold. I'm out cold, don't know anything, frozen. But they're moving around, jockeying me into position to take me back to bed. Right here's the center. That's about an inch in diameter. That was melted all the way to the ground. The grasses are showing. And this is my footprint here the next day. This is my moon boot. I don't know if you remember those. That's the tread. And you can see that this is going straight down. There's none of this business of nice curve here. So I really think that I was materialized in that spot, and the snow just came up around. It wasn't a matter of coming down into it as this is. So this crushes everything, comes down. This is 36 hours, perhaps 24 hours minimum after that night, and it's still hot. It was still warm radioactive-wise 4 years later. And we had a group come out, and they ran a Geiger counter over the area. So, if you think, oh, they faked this. Well, I've got $5,000. It can't be faked, but you're going to have to wait 4 years to get it, because you're going to have to test the radioactivity of it 4 years later. This is my foot. This is the toe, my toe. And if you notice, it's hotter here, and then here it's not quite so hot. So my heel is up above the snow. Out here, it shows some transparency here, but generally speaking, I'm not, crushing the snow down to the ground. So that's a diagram of that. But I think that the snow and the snow patterns really tell, a real tale in terms of the abduction return process, and maybe the abduction process in itself. And who's in charge would be probably the people that I had a dream about the first night in 1980, and the very tall people that are dressed in robes. They seem to be robes. They were ancient. I know I was just really amazed at their capabilities, and so I think they're in charge, and these guys are the helpers. And they do the work that the larger people don't want to do. Here's again my foot. Here's the center. Here's my moon boot. Here's my, the smaller people's footprints here. It's down to the ground here, but it's not over here. So it's melted here, but not equally over here in terms of the distance away. So I think they had boots on that were radioactive, because that's the only thing I could think of. And then when the one jumped out and it was hot, it just melted the snow and it turned to mush. When it went down in, it kicked it up like the crater of a meteorite or something. The end of the diagram. This is another shot, of course, in this. I'm sorry, I got hit. Another shot, different angles. And you can see that the footprints of the smaller ones come and go depending on the lighting. And, you know, we weren't really thinking about that at the time. So I called some neighbors over because I wanted somebody else to see this. So it wasn't just me making these stories up and the like. And this friend was the one who saw the rocket, as it were, launch off of the roof of the house. He at one time had an outdoor sporting goods store, and he taught people how to cross-country ski. And he said that he'd never seen anything like this. And the structure of the snow seemed to be fine, you know, it hadn't been tampered with. And so that was, of course, good to hear. This is the schematic. This is the one circle that was intact. The one next to it, it was the dogs had gone through it, or something was moving back and forth between the two circles here. And the prints were so muted that you couldn't tell. This was the only other footprint that was unidentifiable, other as a dog or a moon boot or whatever. This print is 7.5 inches long, and I don't know if you can see it, it slides in and then goes straight down, as you would with, you know, snow. Schematic, trying to show that. There's a cross section. Oops. Okay, this, I'm going to forget the other one. I think you got the idea. The boot just came sliding in and then went down, almost like something stalking, like a crane or something stalking in the water. So this is Sunday afternoon, and I'm still figuring out what happened, and you know, probably never will. And which reminds me of a quote that I'd like to read, because I think it's really poignant and expresses my feelings about this. I hope you'll bear with me. I hope. I'm sorry. I don't have it. It's a quote by Einstein. I do have it. You've probably heard this one before, but I'd like to read it anyway. Everything is determined, the beginning as well as the end, by forces over which we have no control. It's determined for the insect as well as for the star, human beings, vegetables, or cosmic dust. We all dance to a mysterious tune intoned in the distance by an invisible piper. And that's Albert Einstein, one of his quotes, which I think is really important. Thank you for being so attentive. Thank you very much. If you have time for just maybe 5 more minutes.
We love some Q&A, if that's okay.
Yeah, I want to show you this. This won't take long.
Oh, okay, sure.
Okay, this one will not take long unless I totally blow it. But I think there was a strong ley line. One of the reasons I think what happened to us with the number of kinds of sightings that we had was the ley line. This is taken up on top of the roof. This is the ditch, and this is the tree that really speaks to me. And it was normally as tall as these trees. These are cottonwoods growing in the bottom of this ditch, which I think was a strong ley line. This is the tree now, or then, and you can see all the foliage that's around it. I took this in like April of 1995. This came from a video. This looks like it happened maybe earlier or later in 1994. And this tree is completely circled all around here with the limbs that it once had. Here's some that are down. And they all have sort of one thing in common. They have like holes that have been blasted through them, about a 1 inch in diameter, as you can see here. So all these limbs were just pruned from this big tree. And I really think that the ley line just had maybe a great energy thrust to it, and it just blew up this sacred tree. And it was sacred because the Native American spirit that had once harassed the dogs in 1980 had evidently made up and was then using the dogs as their pledges to do the sun dance. The sun dance would go around and around cottonwood, a particular cottonwood tree, and I think that's what this was. And so here's another one, another photo. Here's the hole. So I think that had a lot to do with that. And at the same time, our daughter now lives outside of Palo Alto. They live on the San Andreas Fault. Their daughter's daughter, who went from the time she was 4, talked about seeing the shadow man. And the shadow man, she said, was really tall, watched over her, and had a big wing with it. That would be a Native American shaman. They usually have a wing that they use for prayer and for various ceremonies. And they're right on the San Andreas Fault, much to our concern. So the fault lines, I think, are really important. This is a photograph of our grandson on the other side of our Scott's son. And this was taken at Ocean Beach. Capitola Beach in 2016. And you might notice this object up here. So what has been happening to me from the time maybe I was 5, and then really accelerated when I was 40, 41, and so on. And it was 43 before I realized, that I had a history. And then I remember my mother talking about seeing lights at night when they lived at what was called the Wagstaff place, was not far from where the Olathe Naval Air Base was. It seemed as though it had been, I guess it's common that their interest in you goes from mother to son, son to mother, and so on down the line. Also, my wife, Sarah, had an experience with a rocket ship when she was dating me. We think that maybe we were together, and I don't remember it, but she did. So she was really outdoorsy too, and so was I, and so you have a better chance of having an encounter. So this has been investigated by our friend Ethan Rich, who's a super investigator. He used to work with MUFON. So I'd like to close with that image, and if I were you and lived in California and wanted to maybe have an experience, I'd get on the San Andreas Fault as close as I could to it, and I would meditate. And I would give myself at least a day, a solid day of going after it, and have, more of a spiritual feeling for what I've told you than what maybe you normally do have. And maybe something will happen. Maybe you'll have a sighting. But thank you very much for being kind to me.